Thanks. Thanks, Rich. And Rich, it's been about 2 months for me, and the progressives make sense eventually. You're going to be motion sick for the next couple of weeks, but after that, they eventually start to make sense and you can start to see things, so good luck with that. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining me today for this, and thank you to the Chamber and the sponsors for making this event a reality today. I want to start by acknowledging that we're being joined today by Chief Rhonda Larrabee of the Kakite First Nation and her husband, Brian. As the city is working through its reconciliation journey and learns about the true history of the displacement of Rhonda's ancestors and relations from the land that we were on, I appreciate that Rhonda is always present here, always sharing her history, sharing her story, and reminding us that reconciliation is not about the ancient past. Reconciliation is about people here today. And I also know it's a special day for Rhonda today and her family, so I just want to thank you for taking the time on your birthday to come and hang out with us for a little while. Thanks. Progressives, just because they don't hold on. I wanted to start this entire thing by asking everyone to do some deep breathing exercises and maybe some yoga stretches, because it has been a hectic last 12 months. It has been chaotic. Unprecedented is a word that everyone's using all the time. It's been stressful, anxiety-causing for some people. And we're here, we got through it. Let's all calm down. We're gonna move on from all the chaos that's been happening. It's been a period of global unrest. And we had, for example, 3 major elections in the last 7 months, all that have effects right here in the city of New Westminster. I'm not going to talk too much about the situation down south, except to say that there is really no precedent and there's no model for us to learn from about what happens when your largest trading partner intentionally tanks their own economy as a bargaining technique while they disassemble their own democracy. We don't really know how to deal with that. It is sad, it is frustrating to see, and it's very difficult for governments at every level to figure out how to adapt to that. But if nothing else from that, we've learned that elections matter, and who wins elections really matters. And speaking of results, we had 2 elections here in Canada. We had a provincial and a federal election in the last 7 months. And it's hard to take a theme out of those even, because both of them were change elections. That's all we heard. This is a change elections, and in both cases, the same government was returned. So I don't know how to learn from that, but the other theme of these elections, I think, was one of real political polarity, of a more divisive politics than perhaps we're used to in Canada. And I might, on my own point, lament a bit that there wasn't a lot of conversation about public policy solutions to the problems that we're facing, the challenges we're facing as a country. It was a feels election, especially the federal one, more than it was about policy election. And that gives short shrift to the real challenges that we are facing. We're facing as a country, but we're also facing here as a city. We are still in a housing crisis. We still lack the mental health and addiction services that are required to protect the most vulnerable in our community and to assure that everyone in our community feels safe in our community. Wages are not keeping up with the cost of living, and the climate is changing in very destructive ways for many of our communities. Meanwhile, we are still dealing with the hangovers of COVID and the global pandemic, and the social fabric that was frayed somewhat by COVID is really slow to heal because we've lost a bit of our connection to community. This is actually made worse by the hollowing out of local journalism and by, I'm going to say it, online algorithms that moderate how we talk to each other in ways that sort of drive us towards division, because division drives clicks instead of driving us towards working together. So it's a time of change. It's a time of big shifts and of systems that we all thought we understood. And it's also a time when there's a lot of people clinging to those old systems because those old systems are what served them. And that is where our conflict is right now. And one of my favorite civil servants, my favorite uni workers, is Jeanette Sadek-Khan. She was a transportation commissioner in New York City as they were going through big changes. And she always said, the status quo, when you challenge the status quo pushes back really, really hard. And that's what we're seeing right now, is a challenge for new ideas and a status quo pushing back hard. And some of these changes force us to rethink what the role of local government is. You should know, I think everyone in the room knows by now, that you've got a council here that's not really as interested in pointing, like the three Spider-Man meme, pointing at other governments and saying it's their problem to solve. We advocate hard all the time to our senior governments for housing, for infrastructure support, for better healthcare supports. But in the meantime, while we wait for senior governments to get their stuff sorted out, we make the investments in our community that we need to care for our community. And this is demonstrated, I think, in a lot of the region-leading work and progressive work that we are doing on our major files. In the center of all of our regional challenges right now is housing. The lack of affordable housing, the lack of housing security, and the perilous financial situation that scarcity in our housing market creates for too many people in our community. The housing crisis is holding back our prosperity as a city, and it's holding back the livability of our region. Last year, we were along with 29 other municipalities across the province. We were given housing target orders by the provincial government. And I might have grumbled a little bit at the time, said a word on TV I shouldn't have said, but I was happy to report recently to the Minister of Housing that New Westminster has met its goals, already met our goals for year one, and are going to meet our housing targets for year one. We've also met all of our legislative requirements for the raft of new housing regulations, from multiplexes to transit-oriented areas, and we've created a new interim financing growth model, which sounds boring, but it's the important part that makes sure that we can pay for the infrastructure we need to support that new housing when it comes. But in all of those new legislation that came from the province, we have met the letter of the law. And now we have a little bit more difficult work to do as we develop our community plans. We need to develop them in a way that supports the spirit of those regulations in a way that actually fits the New Westminster context. And our staff in planning, our staff in engineering, our staff in almost every department in the city have been burning the midnight oil to make that happen before the end of this year. The fortunate part of that is that we were successful in applying for an $11.4 million grant through the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund program. And another $500,000 was provided to us in support from the provincial government. That money has actually allowed us to bring in the resources and dedicated staff time to get this work done with very little impact on local taxpayers. And in the end, whether it's the new towers downtown, whether it's the final phase of the Brewery District, or it's the 6-story housing that's going up in Sapperton, and or whether it's townhouses being built in Queensborough and in the West End, or that new rental tower in the Uptown, we are getting housing built in New West. And I'm glad to say that we are finally seeing significant affordable housing built in New West. Douglas College is building student housing on their campus, and that is going to change how that institution contributes to this community. Following the success of the Luma and Swahili Vision project uptown that brought 95 units of truly affordable housing uptown, we now have construction of 52 units of affordable housing on 6th and Agnes, and we are about to break ground on 89 units of deeply affordable housing near the 22nd Street SkyTrain station, both of those projects supported by the provincial and federal government. And we are seeing for the first time real integration of protected affordable housing within new market housing we are building in New Westminster. The PAL project, the Performing Arts Lodge project that's down on called Ovation, that's open down in Carnarvon with a second building which is totally affordable housing. The PC Urban project uptown, the rental project uptown, includes affordable units and potentially a significant number of affordable units in Columbia Square. And ultimately, these solutions are slow to come. I recognize that. But Council is committed to assuring that housing for all is part of our vision for the community. As committed as we have been over the last decade to protect the most affordable housing in the city, and despite regional market forces going the other direction, we are finally seeing some stability in the local rental market. We have protected the most affordable rental, and we're getting more rental supply online, and that is finally stabilizing rent increases. And it'll be interesting to see, ultimately, what happens with the new federal emphasis on funding housing, and to find out what that familiar face in the role of housing minister at the federal level will do for us. You can love or hate Gregor Robertson, but one thing I can say, he spent a lot of time when he was in mayor saying the federal government had to spend more money on housing. And it's good to see him in a place where he's going to have to hold that check now in his hands. And he does know the impacts of housing on a city like New Westminster, because he had similar issues in Vancouver. So I'm looking forward to see where that goes. Now, as the housing work goes on, we can't ignore the current, and I'll call it what it is, a dire situation in our community related to the overlapping crises of homelessness and mental health and addictions that are untreated in our streets. Here again, New Westminster is showing leadership while never relenting from the pressure we are applying on the federal and provincial governments to step up and take responsibility, to do their job and make the investments they need to make to end the suffering. But I've been working with the BC Urban Mayors Caucus to raise a common voice to the province and to the feds throughout the elections. And we all the mayors in British Columbia agree that the ultimate solution to the suffering that we're seeing in every community in British Columbia are investments in healthcare and housing. And we have seen recent announcements here in New Westminster, even more care beds opening in New Westminster right now. There was an announcement last week. And those care beds are desperately needed and are starting to come to our community. But the scale of the problem is such that these interventions simply cannot come fast enough. And in the meantime, as a city, we need to do our work at home here to alleviate the suffering and to support the safety of the community. The Crisis Response Pilot Project is bringing non-clinical outreach workers to the streets to help connect people to supports and services that are available to them. Our new community liaison officers are providing support to residents and to businesses in the community who are managing the interface issues. And our advocacy teams are working with Fraser Health and other partners to bring new partnerships online here in New Westminster to get people off the street and into care. And the pilot project, it recently received a big boost when we got $1.4 million from the Federal Emergency Treatment Fund. We were the only city in British Columbia to get EFT funding, and this was the biggest grant, the second biggest grant given to any municipality in Canada. And that was recognition that our evidence-based, our integrated and compassionate approach to these challenges, the challenges that every community in Canada is facing, has received the highest endorsement from the federal government. This is what happens when a city doesn't point out, doesn't blame out or shy away, but shows leadership. People get help, communities see hope, and lives are improved. When staff presented this program last week at a Residents Association forum at Century House, the audience actually at Century House applauded the staff. There were no elected people they had to blow smoke at in that room. They applauded staff for the incredible work that staff had done in not only putting this program together. I mean, people walked into that room seeing the problem and wondering what the city was doing, and staff was able to talk to them about the integrated approach we're doing, the work we're actually doing on the ground, and how that work is being funded by a large part of it is being funded by the federal government. So the staff deserved the applause they did for putting that program together and for making it work. And through that process, I'm going to say, we have received incredible support from the business community in New Westminster. The Chamber and the BIAs have been partners in helping us engage with the business owners and the residents in this community. They have worked with us to help design the crisis response. And they've helped us meet with their members and talk with their members and help the communication stay open between the business community and the city so that we make sure that the needs that we're addressing are the needs that the business community needs us to address in order to make them successful. And we know it's been a difficult post-COVID period for a lot of businesses, and we're not around the corner yet. But I can say the indicators on the ground right now are really good in the city. We have more businesses opening every week in the city of New Westminster. We have more business licenses now than we ever had by far. And more New Westies are working in New Westminster instead of having to commute to other cities to get to work every day. Commercial lease space rarely stays vacant for long, especially retail space on the street, which is putting actually upward pressure, especially on retail lease rates. However, the nature of retail and the service industry has changed in the post-COVID period, and we are continuing to adapt as a city to support business through these changes as best we can. We recently modernized our business license regime completely. We took it apart and rebuilt it. I shouldn't say we, staff did this. They simplified the process by reducing by a significant the number of types of business licenses we have, just to reduce categories to make it simpler for businesses to navigate that process. And in many cases, significantly reducing our business license costs for businesses. And we're now launching into a review of the economic development plan, recognizing the city needs to keep up with the changes that are impacting your businesses. And at the same time, again, back to the advocacy side, our council has been leading in advocacy at the provincial government level for changes in taxation and changes in other regulations to better protect small, local serving businesses, amplifying the voices of the Chamber and the BIA when we talk to the province to get those regulatory changes. And I want to give a quick shout out to the Sapperton Business Collective, a new organization in town. Katarina is a business owner in Sapperton, and she and Councillor Henderson had started organizing some community-based events in order to draw people into the businesses along East Columbia. And as they were doing that work, they learned that the Sapperton business owners, there was a well there of Sapperton business owners who really felt a strong desire in rooting themselves deeper in the community. And so they got together to create and launch the Sapperton Business Collective. Their first official event happened this previous winter, and they now have a members, has a seat on the Arts and Culture and Economic Development Advisory Committee. There's so much cool stuff going on in Sapperton, and a lot of really unique business destinations there. And the Premier was there last week. I don't know if you saw, he showed up for an afternoon, went to a restaurant, tried his hand at some archery, had some donuts, scoped out Canadian merch right here in New Westminster. So it was nice to see that businesses in Sapperton are working together collectively to try to boost their own neighborhood. Now there's this long part of the talk about how I talk about all the major projects that we've delivered, that $95 million. The ones we're delivering and have delivered in the last year. The list is long, and there are some city staff in the room, and they're all going to be disappointed because I'm not going to mention their proudest work probably, because there's only a half an hour and we've got to get to Q&A. So I will talk through a few highlights. We are investing in public safety with a full implementation of the Emergency Medical Responder Program. This is a learning we took out of the heat dome. And this is going to allow more of our first responders to be able to provide with enhanced medical services and emergency services in emergency situations. They've also rolled out a second responder program, piloting a great life-saving innovation that was developed by our own fire department. Our police have secured some pretty significant senior government funding for anti-gang and anti-child exploitation programs to proactively prevent some of the most harmful criminal activity in our community. Meanwhile, we have seen significant drops in the rates of property-related crimes and robberies, while road safety stats are showing real progress. And I recognize, as I say that these are areas where statistics don't really matter to people. I can talk to you about the statistics around crime, but there are a lot of people in town who are feeling less safe and less comfortable right now in some parts of town. And those feelings are valid. The city does not dismiss that and does not recognize that that is not a concern. We are working with our partners in the province, with service providers, and with the police board to improve the sense of public safety, especially in our commercial areas. And we are expanding, for things like expanding the hours of the community liaison officers so that folks, so we have folks present who are addressing interface issues and are working on strategies for improving park patrols and things like that. This is an ongoing body of work. It's not something we're completed. It's something we're working on right now. And it's something that, I just want to say, it's something the city takes seriously. We do hear the community about this. And we recognize that it's not just about resources. It's about finding innovative approaches, and it's about finding better partnerships with the province, with other providers in the community, because everybody in this community deserves to feel safe in public spaces, and we will work to make it that way. Meanwhile, our public spaces are being greened up. We have planted in the last year 1,000 new trees in the last year, and more than 6,000 smaller plants, shrubs, and plantings in order to improve our natural areas, all again with the help of $2.5 million in contributions from the federal and provincial governments and from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We have opened Thomas Out Aquatic and Community Center, and to great success with daily visits that are no doubt exceeding our expectations, and programs for youth and seniors are expanding and filling up. It is a beautiful piece of architecture. We did win the Prix Versailles from UNESCO for the most beautiful sports facility in the world, which is a nice architectural prize to win and be recognized in Paris for the architecture. But it's the Functional Excellence Awards, to me, that I think is more important to the community. We the Hansen Foundation Gold for accessibility, the Canadian Green Building Council Zero Carbon designation, the BC Recreation and Parks Association providing us a provincial award for facility excellence, the Recreation Facilities Association of BC awarding for climate action and for operational excellence. The place is operating really wonderfully, and it's just a beautiful piece to add to the community. It was a generational investment in recreation and the city, and we're not stopping there. We're currently finishing up our Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan, and that gives us a new roadmap to the next phase of parks and recreation investments and services across the city for the decade ahead. From all-weather fields to lacrosse boxes to, do I have to say it? Pickleball courts. And there's another big generational investment right now in restoring the Massey Theatre. That is a $34 million investment to save and improve the 76-year-old jewel of Uptown. We are doing structural upgrades. We're replacing the roof and the building envelope. We're doing accessibility upgrades to the interior spaces so we can have accessible washrooms in that building. And we are replacing the end-of-life heating and cooling systems, which will guarantee the next generation of new Westies will be able to enjoy musical theater in this one-of-a-kind, historic 1,300-seat Presidium Theater. There is the last theater of its type in the region and a commitment to historic preservation that this council is keeping. Add to this the tens of millions of dollars that we are investing in roads and sewers and street lights and sidewalks, from the West End Sewer Separation Program to Massey Victory Heights light replacement and the 6th Street sidewalk replacements. There's a lot going on in the city, with support specifically from the province's Growing Communities Fund and from the federal green infrastructure funding. I haven't even talked about pedestrian safety or mobility lanes or the work to support vulnerable seniors that's going on in the city, our youth climate action teams. There's a lot happening in City Hall, there's a lot happening in our community centers, and there's a lot happening at the Works Yard. And I can't get out of here without mentioning that we got a deal done with TransLink to get it funded and to get public transit growing again in this region for the next couple of years. New West is one of the most transit-reliant cities in the country, sitting as it does in the center of the growing region. And there are few things that will impact our city's affordability goals, our climate goals, our livability goals, than assuring that public transit is affordable, frequent, and reliable for our residents, for the people who work and shop in our city, and for the entire regions, that people have an alternative every day to queuing up at the Queensboro Bridge. And I want to emphasize an area, I want to unpack a little bit an area of work in the city where I think something we're doing really well, I think, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, but I'm concerned that we're going to struggle to do in the coming years. And that is how the city communicates with the community. Folks who know my background know that this is something I care about, yes, even more than how much I care about bike lanes. I have spent 20 years in this city, in this community, talking about community, things the city is doing and the things that the city can do better. Before I was elected, I was named Citizen of the Year for this work, for leading conversations about community and about climate and about road safety and about a vision for a better New Westminster. And in my first term on council, I was proud to work with Mayor Cote on the Public Engagement Task Force. And I'm even prouder of the way that staff in our city have taken that roadmap and made us a leader in public engagement. And that means the things that I talked about earlier about Thomasout, about our regional, provincial our response to housing legislation, our crisis response work, our economic development efforts, all of these are informed more than ever by conversation with the community that we are serving. And we have receipts for those conversations, meaning all of those meetings with stakeholders, all of those open houses we held, the surveys we put out, the pop-ups, the online conversations, we report out on all of those, and we report out publicly and transparently, so that if you don't like the decision we made, at least you can go look and see how we talked to the community and how we ended up at that decision. I think that transparency part of the engagement is the really important big step that we've made. So it's with increasing frustration, I guess, that I see misinformation and disinformation online is replacing our clear communications about what's happening in the community. When I was first elected, every week I got 4 newspapers on my doorstep in this city. They were all four editions a week of a local newspaper. Now, with the New West Record closing up shop, we have no local journalism anymore in New Westminster. Their journalism and their telling our stories as a community is quickly being replaced by something else. And I'm afraid it's Facebook algorithms that are filtering out some of the news we'd like to maybe see and instead is driving division, because division drives clicks. And there are actors locally and regionally that are more than happy to fuel that misinformation fire. So look for tomorrow, by the way, there'll be a news story twisting what I said here today to, not a news story, I shouldn't say news story because that's a disrespect to journalists. There will be stories about how this speech was, it'll drive division into this speech. It will dismiss any of the good news I've talked about or any of the good work I've talked about, like congratulations again to staff, and will only talk about the challenging times, about the things, the problems we have not solved yet, the things we're still working on and are struggling to find better solutions for. I was at a residents association last month, and a clearly irate resident berated me about some changes that were happening in his neighborhood. And the latest thing, the city is forcing down his neighborhood's throat without even talking to them about it. And I am not criticizing that resident. I think if I had read what he read on Facebook about what was happening, I would be as irate as he was, and I would be giving it to the mayor about it. But almost everything he said to me was false. It wasn't true. And I was able to connect him with the factual information, but I was also able to point out the consultation report and show that 500 people in his neighborhood, in his community, had already provided input to the city about this change that's happening. That we had, and this is a project that was still in the planning stages, and that far from planning in secret, we had put signs up in his neighborhood. We had advertised in the New West Record and online and in every community building. And we had sent actually leaflets to every house in his neighborhood imploring people to please engage in this conversation. But we missed him. For some reason, we missed him. We did not catch him, and we did not get him engaged in that conversation. And in that void that we left, bad information filled that void, as it always does. And Brandolini's law prevailed. It takes 10 times as much energy to clean up bad information than it does to transmit bad information. So I'm worried, actually, this is only going to get worse. With our traditional ways of communicating going away, with Teresa McManus not here in the room right now to give this speech a fair shake, with the online world becoming more polarized and divisive, it's only going to get harder for us to share our stories and to talk about what the city is doing to try to serve you, to try to engage you, to try to get the businesses and the residents at this, and is the city meaningfully engaged in the decisions we're making. And people are going to get angry because of that separation. But when we did our Ipsos poll of the city last year to inform our budget process, it tells a very different story than this, though. It turns out that if you do a scientific survey of this community, New Westminster is a pretty happy place. 88% of people in that poll in this city think quality of life is good in New Westminster, and the majority of them think it's stayed the same or gotten better in the last 3 years. Most people think council is doing a good job at our strategic priorities. 77% are very satisfied or satisfied with the city, with the level of city services. 78% of people think they get good value for their tax dollar in New Westminster. You will not read that on the X. So I'm going to close with another positive note on the topic of engagement, and that's the Community Advisory Assembly. This was a pilot project that grew out of that the Community Engagement Task Force. This is a project on deliberative dialogue. We brought together 36 residents who didn't know each other, but represented as close as we could get the diversity of our community. There are generational residents there, and there are newcomers. There are people from every neighborhood of the city. There are renters, there are owners, there are youth, there are seniors. There are people with lived experience of homelessness, and there are people who have disabilities, people who are living in recovery. There are people who represent the entire diversity of our community as close as we could in 36 people. And we brought them together and asked them to advise council on a variety of topics. And we took the time to give them more information about that topic and the time better than we can in an online forum or an open house. And we gave them the time to talk to each other about this topic. And we asked them to come to consensus about what advice they should give council about that topic. And it was an incredible success by every measure. We were at a local government meeting a couple of weeks ago where all the local governments from the Lower Mainland get together and talk about what's going on in our cities. And this was held up by SFU as a model for other cities because it's a model that asks citizens to talk to each other first, to hear people they disagree with, and to think about solutions, not solving my problem, but how solutions will solve problems for the entire community as a whole. And that's a different way of doing public engagement. They were actually able to guide staff and council in some pretty thorny issues. And the other part of it is that they found themselves more engaged in their community, more appreciative of the community they're in, and more appreciative of the neighbor who they never met before and completely disagreed with on the topic of bike lanes. So I think hiding in that engagement model and that model of community dialogue is the answer in how we keep connected and informed in these chaotic times, which are forcing us apart. We need more face-to-face dialogue. We can't let the algorithms define our worldview for us. We need to get to know our neighbors without those filters and tell our good news stories. This is why after the business luncheon, I'm going to take this show on the road. I'm going to be sharing the state of the city with other audiences. I'm going to take it to the seniors at the senior center, to youth at the youth center. And from my booth at the farmers market, which I'm setting up tomorrow, give me a call. I'll come to your residents association and talk about this. I will talk to your business association. I will talk to your softball team. I will come to your backyard barbecue and stand on a soapbox, and I will yell at your neighbors that New Westminster is leading and doing good work, and gosh darn, we're proud of it. So I will look forward to that invite. And I say, if you run a business in New Westminster, you run a service organization, the best way you can boost community is to also brag about your work, brag about the neighbors who help you with your work, about your customers, and about your employees. People are right now seeking local connection. This Buy Canadian thing can be a passing trend, or it can be something that we hold on to for a long time. People want to shop local. They want to know who they're shopping from. People want connection, and you can be part of delivering that connection to your community. So I'm asking you to speak up as well. Speak up for yourself and speak up for your community. Don't let the forces of negativity stop us from achieving what is possible. New Westminster is a can-do place, and we are a very proud place. And I'll just, for example, when is the last time you saw anybody walking around with a hashtag Burnaby hat on? Yeah, it never happens. Thanks, Mike. I'm just going to wave at Mike there on the camera. So the state of New Westminster is strong, and we are tackling the toughest issues with compassion and with intent. And our population is growing because it is a great place to live. Our businesses are growing because people want to shop and work locally. We are lifting each other up, we are celebrating what makes us unique, and we are leading the region on issues that matter. And I want to leave you with the image of a little tugboat on the river. A tugboat which is small, and it's seemingly pushing an enormous load and against an unrelenting current. But like that tugboat, we are making progress because New Westminster is much more powerful than its size. We are working hard, and we are getting that work done. So thank you for taking the time to come and speak today. And I think I'm turning it over to you for Q&A and to invite Charmaine. Should I go sit over there or should
please.
I? Okay,
yes, please
thank you.
Have a seat. Again, round of applause for Mayor Patrick. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excellent. I'm going to invite our moderator up now. We are very, very lucky to have Charmaine De Silva with us. Please come join us on the stage, Charmaine. Charmaine is a former broadcaster and a journalist who's been covering topics and important issues across Lower Mainland for years. And now Charmaine has crossed over to the dark side, as I like to call it, of public relations. Uh-oh. Yes. But she's doing a great job, and we are really lucky. So please welcome Charmaine De Silva.
Thank you, Rich. It's on.
Thank you.
So
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And nice to see everyone here today. For those of you who have been submitting your questions through the app, please continue to do so. And also, please feel free to upvote the questions that are most important to you so we can grill the mayor collectively together. It just doesn't have to be me. All right.
I'm ready.
There was a lot that you packed into the State of the City address. But I wanted to start off with housing because you did mention new federal government, new housing minister, somebody here in the region that we know. Our community also has, for the first time in a very long time, a member of parliament who is part of the governing party. So let's fast forward to that first conversation with Gregor Robertson. What's on the agenda for you, other than, of course, asking for dollars, but what type of investments are you looking for, and what do you need him to understand about the needs of our community?
Wow. The conversation's already happened a little bit. We've already started the conversations. I met with Jake Sawatsky recently for lunch. I've also had some email contact with Gregor around congratulating him on his job. I haven't had a contact with him since he got his new cabinet position yesterday, but he's probably more busy than you can imagine right now. I said to folks earlier that I'm actually happy that Gregor's in that position because Gregor spent a lot of time as mayor complaining to the federal government that they needed to invest more in housing. And now he's the guy who's going to have to write the checks. And so I think it's good to have somebody who has that context, who recognizes that cities can't do it all without support from the federal government. I think it's really fortunate that Gregor is in the riding right next door to us. He does understand New Westminster's challenges around housing, around poverty, around a lot of things, because they're the same issues that Vancouver faced when he was mayor. And I'm really hoping that he and Jake, and I had a conversation with Jake and said, you might want to listen to Gregor a little bit if you want to learn quickly about what the challenges that we're facing in the city. I think the idea of having those two working together to support us will be really helpful for New Westminster. There's a bigger theme that is often said in local government side is that the federal government, on any issue, the federal government has the money, the province has the regulatory power, and the city has the problem. So, and I think that housing, that's exactly the situation. I think the province has stepped up a lot in the last couple of years on dealing with that regulatory side and taking the barriers out of the way to get housing built. And it was challenging, it was difficult at the time. I grumbled a bit at the time, all the mayors did, but I think in the long-term vision for the changes the province is proposing for housing will be a good thing. I think the role of the federal government is money. It is. I just want to make it that way. It's providing us support. At the time, the Housing Accelerator Fund was an excellent form of support for us because we needed staff in the city. We needed to change our regulatory environment, and we needed support to do that. And the Housing Accelerator Fund gave us the resources to be able to do that. That was a good move. But now, I always say, the roots of our housing crisis today was the decision 30 years ago by the federal government, by Paul Martin's budgets that decided to get the federal government out of the business of building housing. This country used to build 15 to 20,000 units of affordable housing every year if the federal government would pay for that. They stopped doing that 30 years from now. and decided the market could fill that void. The market, when it's going well, can help fill some of that void, and we are getting some non-market housing out of market development. But when times are tough, that well goes dry very quickly. And there will always be a portion of people in Canada, like in any industrialized nation, of people who just cannot afford to get into that market, and where do they go? So our affordable housing stock, a lot of it is 30 and 40 and 50 years old because it was built based on that federal funding that used to come to us. So when I talk to Gregor, that's going to be the answer. It's as easy as, when are you going to get back into the business of building supportive housing in British Columbia and everywhere in the country?
Now, the other housing topic that you mentioned was just about the fact that, yes, we need more affordable housing, need money for that, but New Westminster is building. We're seeing it everywhere across our community. But as we build, there are growing questions about amenities and what we need to do to make sure that as that density increases, we're not sacrificing livability. And you mentioned the generational investment in Thomas Hout, gorgeous building. And as a mom, I can tell you we're there often for everything from public swim to drop-in activities. But gosh darn it, it is impossible to get your kid into swimming lessons. So, as we build and as we see the density increase, how do we make sure that the amenities and services that we have for the people who are already here keeps up with that demand and growing influx of people into our community?
Yeah, New Westminster is a really good planning city. We plan very well. We don't necessarily deliver as quickly as we like to sometimes. But right now we are going through our Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. There was a big public engagement about it. I can show you the receipts, and we're still working on that, and we'll be releasing it soon. But it's the first half is understanding the plan. The province has given us new tools through housing regulations. They have given us new tools called ACCs, which allow us to actually extract more value out of new developments for things like amenities. We weren't able to build a recreation center using developer tools except through complex negotiations. Now we have clearer tools to do that. We need to understand our needs. New Westminster cannot be everything to everybody. And I'll say this, recognizing some of our strengths are also some of our weaknesses. We are 15 square kilometers. There is no new land. We are not building out into greenfield space. So we have to think differently about how we deliver some public services. If your interest is in having 6 new softball fields, I'm afraid we do not have the land in New Westminster to build a big softball field complex in New Westminster. But we do have other opportunities. We are putting more money now through the ACC programs and through DCCs into park space acquisition. So at least we can preserve some green space to come along with the density. We also need to think how we build differently. Schools is a perfect example of that, where I had a meeting with Minister Ma last week around innovative ways to build schools in the city, to get the schools. Schools are really difficult to build in New Westminster because we're not building greenfield space up Burke Mountain. You're building on land that already has something on it. You also have to build more compact schools, which means taller schools, which means we have to think deeper about how we park at those schools and how we provide recreation space at those schools. And I think she understands, like she comes from North Vancouver, a dense city as well, and understands that it costs more to build a school per student in New Westminster than it does in Coquitlam or in Langley Township. And they understand that. And I think it was a good productive conversation. We talked a lot about how we can actually get some barriers out of the way. We need to be more innovative in how we use space. And that is true for any really dense city. It is in the regional interest. Every city in this region has a role. And that's why we do regional level planning. We are a dense city with 5 SkyTrain stations with a established urban character. And that is a place where we have to build into that character and fill our role in that character. And we'll let Surrey build the 17 fields of softball because we simply don't have the space here. In the meantime, there are going to be amenities here in New Westminster that they're not going to be able to get, and they're going to come and use them here.
Now you mentioned the school question, and of course it's included from the audience questions, and specifically around Columbia Square. Is there something the city can do with developers to require support towards schools? Because I know that the crunch in capacity in schools continues to be a hot topic.
I'd love to have like the Minister of Education and the Minister of Housing here talking about that right now, because yes, maybe, maybe not. We did through the Columbia Square process. The Columbia Square is not yet an adopted project in New Westminster. It's received third reading by council, and there's a lot of work to do in design and use at Columbia Square right now before we give it final approval. But we did negotiate through that process an airspace parcel and basically said to them, if the school board and the province, fundamentally the province has to make this decision, if they want to have a school on that site and it makes sense to them that that's how they're going to fill their school needs, the developer has to provide them the space and build the building for them. And that's how we can leverage sometimes amenities out of developers to do that work. The problem is the new housing regulations really limits our ability to negotiate amenities out of developers. It actually says to us, you're not really supposed to be negotiating that. You should have a clear and transparent tool so that they can deliver that tool. And schools is not one of the things that we can add we can have a tool for. So we cannot, by law, require a school to be built in a new development like that. We can negotiate, and there's a question about how we can do that negotiation right now. It's a legislative concern, which is why I don't think the Minister of Education and the Minister of Housing would necessarily agree on what that means. And I think our staff are struggling to find out what that means. Every conversation I have had with Ravi Kahlon over the last 2 years with the Minister of Housing, every conversation I've had with Lisa Baer in education and with Bowen Ma last week, I told them that schools are the thing that's stopping us right now. That every time that we talk about housing, trying to meet our housing targets, we talk about the things we're trying to do to meet the province's expectations for us and the region's expectations for us, all of it is being threatened by the fact that I can't look at the residents of the city and say, I know where the school is going to be. So I am talking to the province about this, and I'm challenging them to, we need to move quicker in schools and have more certainty on schools, because there is a transition that's happened over the last 10 years that I don't think the Ministry of Education really anticipated or saw coming or were able to react to. And that is young families living in small apartments. The old model of family, young kids live in apartments, or single people live in apartments and then they move into a townhouse or a house when they have families. That's not the reality anymore because of the cost of housing. And so when the province sees downtown New Westminster and sees a bunch of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, they don't think there's going to be a bunch of kids coming out of that apartment to take space in schools. And they're wrong. And they were wrong. They know now that they were wrong. They recognize now the demographics are clear. Because our fastest growing demographic in New Westminster is millennials with kids. That is our fastest growing demographic in the city. So we're slow to catch up. I know the Minister of Education is aware of that. I know that Bowen Ma, by giving Bowen Ma's, the Ministry of Infrastructure, creating this new infrastructure ministry who's responsible for delivering vertical infrastructure, responsible for delivering hospitals and schools, I think that's a good sign from the province that they're serious about getting building happening on this. But it is, it is a challenge, and we recognize it's a challenge, and it's something we're working on.
Wanted to shift gears a little bit and move towards the local business community. Still feeling this, and this question comes from the audience, still feeling ripple effects of inflation, shifting consumer habits, and of course everything else we're seeing in the globe. What concrete steps are you planning to take over the next year to support economic stability and growth in our community?
So actually, this is a good question to throw back at you. That's an old politician's trick. As we're launching into our economic development strategy right now, I mean, the first step I think is to talk to the economic department, our economic community, to talk to the businesses, the commercial, retail, and service businesses in our city, and make sure that they're telling us what they see and what they need. There's a couple of issues here around, retail is changing, service industries are changing, and I don't think cities are fast enough to pivot to that. And the way that a business operates is different. Things as simple as curbside management, recognizing that For a lot of businesses now, parking in front of the building is not as important as having a loading zone because they're using Skip the Dishes or they're using an online delivery service. Like having like short-term use of curbside instead of long-term parking in front of their business is actually more valuable. These kinds of shifts are happening. We hear from the community a lot that they want, are there any dentists in the room? Okay, I'm hearing a lot from the community that, there's camera, sorry. I hear a lot from the community that they're concerned about how our grade retail spaces are being taken up by service industries, by doctors, dentists, by things like that that don't necessarily create a lively shopping street. They do provide essential services to the thousands of people who are moving into our downtowns, but they don't necessarily make for a lively street. There's other issues around vacant spaces and how we tax commercial development or commercial properties in a way that doesn't necessarily support small local businesses. And we are doing some advocacy at the provincial level about this. Both Ruby Campbell and Tasha Henderson from Council have been spending a lot of time talking to provincial government about how we can adjust the regulatory regime so that taxes that you do pay are able to still support small businesses and small local serving businesses. And they're not priced out of key locations in our residential areas. We have other work to do. I mean, the community liaison officer work is really important in making sure that businesses who do need support, for whatever kind of support, know who to contact at City Hall and know who to talk to about challenges they are facing if they're facing those types of challenges. But right now, I would say updating the business license process was a really big step for our staff. It was a good step in the right direction. We are trying to be more responsive to the needs of today, not the needs of 20 years ago. But all that said, talk to your BIA, talk to your chamber, talk to your business collective, and make sure that you get engaged with the city in the conversation about the economic development plan, because we really need to hear from you, because you know what's shifting on the ground better than we do.
Now, sticking in this realm, another question from the audience. What does the future of the Quay and River Market look like for both businesses and tourism?
Wow. That's a good question. I think that the Quay is in an interesting location because this is a place that needs to serve the local community, I think. I think that there are thousands of people living around that building that did not live there 5 years ago. And I am reluctant to give advice to a private business owner, but that building does belong to a private business owner, and they need to, I think that the goal of finding out what those people in those buildings need every day and to make sure the Quay is providing that to them is really important. The waterfront connection is finally getting built to connect Pier Park again back to the quayside. I think that's a really important shift. I think that having Pier Park separated for so long from the quay was harmful to that community. It was really difficult for that community and difficult for how we operate that public space. And we knew that. I remember having the conversations about that development project, and when they came to us to change from building 5 towers on that space to building 2 towers on that space, we were all happy to see the parking go under grade, and we were happy to see a 2-acre new public park going on there. There was a lot of good news around what was happening there, but the other side was, it's going to be a hole in the ground for a number of years. That was a real challenging thing for us, and I think we're feeling it downtown. So I hope it will be revitalized by just having that opening happen. I think that, and we have some work to do at Pier Park. And I was talking earlier about I've been talking to staff recently about a new way to make sure that people are more invited, more comfortable, feeling safer in Pier Park. And whether it's a park patroller program changes or whether it's something like that, in order to make sure that, or whether it's programming changes, like we don't program Pier Park, and because of that hole next to it, it's been harder to program. We used to do a lot more events in Pier Park than we've done in the last couple of years. So there is some work we want to do, because I think, again, the waterfront, the riverfront needs to be seen as a whole. And I did the river walk for hospice a couple of weeks ago, last week down there, and it was wonderful to have dozens of people doing the walk along the quayside. The quayside is changing so fast. The quayside used to be retired folks downsizing to a condo on the waterfront. The quayside is now young families. They're big floor plate apartments. They're relatively affordable for their size. There are so many young families in the quayside right now. And it's a really vibrant place along the waterfront. And the work that staff does in planting and gardens and flowers along that quayside, people were just glowing walking along the quayside. And I came up with a term, and please, no real estate agents in the room, please don't steal this from me. I'm going to use this somehow. It was like walking in the Fraser Riviera. I know one of your real estate agents here is going to grab that now and use that.
The kids would call that sus.
Okay. Okay, I tried.
Yeah,
but anyway,
nice
I think the riverfront as a whole needs to be. I mean, it needs to be thought of in the whole, and it has been broken up a bit by construction. And I do think the quay is important. I do think it's an important community-serving space, and it is great to see that place active and full. The Fraser River Discovery Center and the city are working on some plans together in order to activate that space better or differently. And I think that there is some opportunities down there to make things more active. So yeah.
And what about Pier Park in Sapperton Landing?
Oh, the
Any
big
plans
question.
on that?
Yeah. So the city knows we had the fire at Pier Park. We lost 2 acres of pier space effectively. With the opening right now, imminent opening of West Pier Park, the area between the towers and the existing Pier Park, we're gaining 2 acres. We're getting that amount of space back. And that's going to be a much more active space and a place designed for public gathering and for other uses. It's going to be a great extension. We still have money in the bank from an insurance settlement for the east part of Pier Park. We have, as council, made a conscious decision first to emphasize the West Pier Park, getting that open and getting that done first, but also not to prescribe what's going to happen in East Pier Park until we have some deeper conversations with First Nations. What we lost was a pier, okay? We didn't lose land, we lost a pier. And in order to replace that pier, we're gonna have to be building on the Fraser River. And I cannot emphasize how important a place that is for First Nations. That waterfront, right where the river narrows, that is a historic pre-contact, for pre-contact reasons, for gathering, for fishing, for a variety of uses for thousands of years before contact. And after contact, that was the place where Governor Seymour, in the colony of British Columbia, gathered the chiefs of the nations together from around the province and made commitments to the chiefs of the nations about how we would work together and they would be made equal partners in the development of British Columbia. Promises that were clearly broken, that were almost immediately broken by Chief Seymour. But it's been told to me many times, and again, it's been told to me many times, and I've witnessed it and been asked to tell this story. The way that discussion happened, that was a colonial governor coming and talking to assembled people, talking about big dreams he had for the province. To the First Nations chiefs who were there and the witnesses were there, they witnessed a commitment. They witnessed a promise. They were told, and they took that back to their communities from New Westminster to the island to the northeast of the province. They took that back to their communities and they were told that story wasn't just a story, it was a commitment and it was a promise. And as those promises were broken, it broke a lot of communities. Now, I only go on to this because I need to emphasize this is not a place of volleyball courts. We think about losing volleyball courts when it burned down, and I think that is important to our community, but the talk about that space is more important to the reconciliation efforts of this city and to the reconciliation efforts of this province. than I think just volleyball courts. So we have to have that conversation with the nations. And we have to let them, instead of us saying, we're going to design something here, what do you think? We need to have that conversation with them and say, what do you think should go here? What property honors this space, this important space? If you want to do gathering here, what kind of gathering does it look like? What does it look like? And once we have those conversations, we will bring it to the community and we will talk about what we build in that space. None of that is taking away from the desire to connect Pier Park to Sapperton Landing. We've been holding off on that conversation until the Tulla Bridge project is completed because there's some land tied up in the Tulla Bridge conversation. Metro Vancouver, we do see a value in making that connection by a trail, by the pathway, by something in that, and that is going to be part of the conversation. We want to give access to that space again. But those are two separate conversations that are coming, and I'm afraid I can't give you much more. I can't preview what that's going to look like yet because those conversations are yet to come.
No, we've run out of time, but it's actually a segue to our last question, which is about truth and reconciliation and the next steps for the city. What's important in your mind?
Telling those stories that, like I just told, and the community getting buy-in in it. We still have resistance in the community to accepting the history of who we are and to recognizing that this is not an ancient history thing, as I said earlier, that we have to just talk about as ancient history. This is an active thing that impacts people living in our community today. And we have had some fits and starts in New Westminster in having those conversations. Again, I always appreciate that Rhonda is here, that Rhonda has never given up, and her, and if Rhonda sometimes seems more forgiving of our inability to move forward as fast as we'd like on this file. I'll tell you, her daughter is less forgiving and gives me the gears all the time about the work we're doing. So talk to Stacy. She's we have a lot of work to do, and there are two projects right now. I have mentioned the Pier Park and what happens in that area of the riverfront. There's another big project around 22nd Street where we are trying to come up with a vision for what that 22nd Street area looks like, where, again, as a city, we are inviting the nations in to have that conversation early instead of just doing our work and then giving it to them and saying, what do you think of this? That's an important step we're doing. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do both with the nations whose history is here in this land, with nations across the province who we have to have another conversation about what does the deeper history of New Westminster's reconciliation pre the province, pre the country, what does that mean? We have work to do with our urban Indigenous populations, with folks who are living with the trauma of residential school, living with the trauma of colonization here in our community and supporting them better. It is a big and difficult and challenging file. I am really excited that Chris Boyle is the minister in the province leading this file because I think she understands. I think she holds this in her heart and cares. And that's going to be good. That's going to be helpful for us as we talk to the province and seek support from province on things around how we actually lead these conversations. So I feel good about it. And I'll say right now, it's not going to be done in my term in mayor. It's not going to be done in the next term of mayor. This is going to be an ongoing thing it took us 100 years to 150 years to take land away from people and to marginalize people, and we're not going to fix that in a week or a year or a term. And the relationship building that has to happen isn't just me and Rhonda. It's us as a community and us as an organization with organizations, because when I'm gone, this reconciliation journey is still going to be happening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor. And thank you to everybody who submitted your questions. Certainly made my job easier.